We're a bit out of my wheelhouse here, but if there's any game on a Nintendo console that would be qualified to be on this show, it would have been the original Splatoon. There's plenty of elements to this oddball shooter franchise that lend itself even better to my show than games I have looked at. My lack of a capture card at the time and the generally lukewarm reception of the Wii U, and of course, Nintendo being Nintendo, I never got around to giving the original game a look in this capacity. But, fast forward to this year, with the announcement of the Switch and a sequel, I have a reason to play a Nintendo game on here. Just don't expect this to be a normal thing. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Splatoon 2. Splatoon 2 is, obviously, the sequel to Splatoon, a colorful shooter based around shape-shifting aquatic creatures and colorful ink sprays, in a stealthily post-apocalyptic modern Japan-styled world. I feel like Splatoon, the sudden closing of the Splatfest in Splatoon, and the announcement of Splatoon 2 all hit like separate punches. Splatoon was a game that didn't get, marketed well initially. While casual viewers of television and the internet debated on whether they were a kid or a squid, while listening to what was probably one of the most awful promotional songs ever to be featured in a commercial, it was word-of-mouth hype that got me interested. I talk so much about Splatoon in the intro of the supposed Splatoon 2 video because, well, it's pretty much the same game. I kinda hinted at this in the side quest, but this all seems like content we could have seen in the original game, had it not been on a dead console walking. This sequel seems more like an expansion pack that became sequelized out of necessity, but luckily if you're fresh to the series, this is about as good a jumping in point as any. Whether you've been out of the loop, don't really care about Ninty or the console market, or just a vet of the original and wondering what was all changed with the Switch version, I hope I can answer at least some questions about Nintendo's strangest franchise yet. If there's any one thing Nintendo has always had down pat, it's a colorful style that sticks out from the crowd. Splatoon 2 is no exception to that rule, save for one glaring one. It looks pretty much exactly like Splatoon 1. Yeah, there's plenty of minor cosmetic changes and options, notably in the amount of customization you get for your Inkling, with Inkling boys no longer forced to have that tentacle top knot. But for the most part, this game will look almost indistinguishable from the game that came before, save for some minor UI tweaks. You can really tell this was basically the alternative to just porting the original game to Switch and calling it Splatoon Deluxe, but it's also a pretty strong case of, if it ain't broke, don't Secret World Legends it. That's not to say they didn't do anything interesting. There's some fantastic amounts of detail and effort where you honestly wouldn't expect there to be much. This is hands down probably the best fog effect I've seen in any game, as the light behaves and reflects off the fog in ways actual fog behaves. It's not just a detail-obscuring smoke filter. Distant objects become misty and shadowed ominously, adding fantastic dread and atmosphere to the mode that you'll be seeing it in. Of course, aesthetic over prowess is another staple of Nintendo, and Splatoon exists in this weird universe of anthropomorphic sea creatures, Inklings being kids with tentacle hair and plenty of humanoid anemone, shrimp in tempura coats, shoe-wearing spider crabs, and what have you. But most notably, a whole style based around Japanese pop culture, like the Akihabara crowd. I've been to Okinawa and recognize the aesthetic from the various malls and arcades around there, though anyone not familiar with the look might mistakenly attribute this to a 90s style aesthetic. Nah, this is just what Japan looks like now. There's a DDR machine outside one of the arcades, for God's sake. Just know that despite the style used, there's no envelope pushing to be had here, which should serve well to have the game stand the test of time rather than dating itself in the advent of new tech. But if you're holding stock in graphic fidelity, don't expect to be blown away. I'm pretty sure at least a few of you are already listing out games with what you feel has a better fog effect. It's just pretty showing that this could have been done on the Wii U. Boy, this soundtrack. Imagine J-pop and Simglish, and you've about covered the stuff you'll be hearing during the multiplayer matches. The music is upbeat and catchy, even though you'll have no idea what they'll be saying. Tracks will even up the J-pop factor to 11 when Splatfest is going on, as each track will be performed by the pop group / news anchors of Off the Hook, who replaced the Squid Sisters in this game. Contrasting the soundtrack with itself, the single-player tunes are just odd. Very, very odd. It almost sounds like it belongs on a different soundtrack, save for some final boss tracks. In fact, I'm almost certain that each song was in the original game and just modified barely for the new one, if at all. There's some catchy tracks in single player too, but it's a far stranger offering. The new Salmon Run mode also has its own playlist, which is very industrial and ominous, with some of the strangest beat mixing, distortion, and deep string notes that make the already tense mode that much more stressful. I'm going to focus mostly on single-player Salmon Run tracks for the background music in the review, not only because they're slightly less distracting, but because most of the multiplayer stuff is a copyright flag magnet. Just expect a lot of weird stuff unless you're used to it from the original game. Simglish garbling expands to the characters themselves, each inkling and creature speaking garbled nonsense that adds a bubbling sound effect filter to bring in that underwater effect and drive home the sea creature point, even if everyone's not underwater in this universe. Combat effects also fit the theme. As you're sloshing very opaque ink everywhere, the wet splashing effects are very on point. Your shots vary from impactful blasts and pops, some sounding more like gunfire and others just sound outright sci-fi. All combined, these sounds can be loud, intense, and even overwhelming, lending well to the overall chaotic nature of the battles, regardless of what kind of battle you're in. Starting out this game isn't all too different from starting out any given MMO-style game. You're immediately tasked with creating your Inkling, a slight departure from the original game, and able to be changed at any time. Your options are boy or girl, with the original game's hairstyles and a few others. You can also choose the look of your starter gear, all to be overridden by the items that you'll buy as you earn cash. You can't choose things like your hair color, as that will depend entirely on what team you're on when you're playing, as you take on that color. The game takes you through a very simple tutorial, going over the basics of how to shoot, move, aim, and the like. Right trigger fires, left stick moves you forward or strafes, and right stick can be used to aim, along with another method. X brings up the map, Y centers the camera, and B jumps. Clicking the right stick activates your special ability, only if the meter is charged. Holding left trigger allows you to transform into a squid, where you'll be able to enter and swim through your color of ink, using this to restore your ink and move very quickly as long as you have the ink to swim in. Using this is the main mechanic of movement within the game, and makes it a bit more involved than just shoot the other guy. Here's where you're going to decide between two control styles. Like the original, the game makes use of the gyroscopic control abilities. However, since the Switch is capable of doing so in handheld mode, Joy-Con mode, or even with the Pro Controller, it can feel a lot less awkward here. I am finding it better, though difficult, to get that sensitivity to a sweet spot, as well as feeling that horizontal movement is far less responsive than vertical. But it seems to be the community at large just hates these motion controls, and prefer to use the standard console shooter stick movement. I've been playing far too many PC games for too long to be using that stick movement, as it's something that just feels more imprecise to me. Tilt controls aren't the best solution to that, but it's something. You might still feel you need more practice before diving into PvP lobbies, and that's where the single player comes into play. Much like the last game, you need to find the grate in the floor, this time marked by Marie from the original game, and transform into a squid and fall through. You'll be taken to Octo Valley, where you can start the single player missions. Single player is part shooter, part platformer, and part puzzle. You have to understand how the stage mechanics and the hazards work to progress through checkpoints and rescue the Zapfish, while each stage must be located in the hub world, and they're hidden until revealed by inking them. What makes this version of single player more interesting than the previous one is that you might be tasked to use a specific weapon to clear a stage, with a few designed around the mechanics of those particular weapons, as opposed to the first game where you needed Amiibo to play through the campaign with anything other than the standard gun. Once a weapon is unlocked in single player, you can use it in any stage. And if you manage to complete every stage with that weapon, you can unlock and purchase it as an alternate skin for some of the standard weapons. It gives a lot more incentive to playing through single player, if a yellow version of an existing weapon can be considered an incentive. But, considering the upgraded hero shooter is basically a splatter shot that looks like an FNP90, hell yeah, it's an incentive. For me at least. It's not even that good. Each overworld reveals a boss once the stages are completed, and I find the bosses in this game far more mechanically interesting than the ones in the original, considering that I don't really remember the original game's bosses outside of the final boss. Here we have a giant oven, an Octo Samurai, a new take on an old boss, a floating shower designed around sniping, and, well... Okay, this is one of those things where I don't really want to spoil anything for anyone who might not know about it, but I kinda have an issue with this game's final boss. If you already know or really don't care about it, then stick around. But if you don't want spoilers, go ahead and click away to this timestamp. 'Cause, I'm not about to ruin it. And while you're at it, stay away from the comment section. See you in the bit if you're heading out. Nintendo is getting a little annoying with this recycled boss crap. Like, it's okay to have a callback, but it's another thing to basically make the same boss from another game and change the situation slightly. I hated how often they've recycled the Baby Bowser boss fight from Yoshi's Island, and aping the same twist-style situation from the Mother Brain fight of Super Metroid for Metroid Fusion just seemed more lazy than tribute. So of course, the final boss is DJ Octavio, in his DJ booth mech, throwing rocket punches you have to shoot to reflect. The only twist this time around is that Callie is on a stage on top of this mech, assisting him. The Callie twist was cool, but not entirely unpredictable. Like the twist of the original game, it was blatantly obvious and constantly telegraphed. The problem is, not only is Callie set dressing for the fight, it plays out exactly the same, save for one difference. It's much, much lamer. Splatoon's Octavio fight was tense and interesting, probably one of my favorite final boss encounters in any game, as it was combining snap aiming, enemy adds, and tricky platforming, all on top of avoiding various enemies and attacks, and getting close enough to take down the boss. This game, you fight him on a non-threatening, vastly open arena, and conclude the fight with a very literal rail shooter as a slightly remixed Calamari incantation plays. It's just, it doesn't feel as satisfying and overall not nearly as special as the original. Is it bad? I don't know. It lacks any sort of punch. An ironic choice of words, as Octavio would do well as a secret character in ARMS. Alright, enough about single player. I'm shoehorning this into an MMO Grinder after all, so let's start talking about how the real meat of the game, the multiplayer, works. If you played the game on Wii U, nothing really changed. The regular play mode, in which you just jump into whatever match becomes available, is still 4v4 Turf War. However, the lobby this time is a ton more lame, as you don't have the Wii U gamepad to play games on while you're waiting. All you get now is a really droning, repetitive tune that loops endlessly, and you're given limited options with the controller buttons to make it sound far worse. If Turf War was gobbledygook to you, it's Splatoon's most famous mode. You spray ink on any horizontal surface it'll stick to, and the team with the most turf covered wins the match. Rounds last only a few minutes. Ink from enemy colors can be overwritten with your own, and any player taken down or splatted will explode in the enemy color's ink, and respawn in a short amount of time. Using the map, you can also super jump to your base, anyone on your team, or any allied squid beacons that teammates will leave on the map. You'll have to get used to Turf War for a while because the game locks you out of other public matches until rank 10. Once you've hit rank 10, you can participate in ranked matches. Ranked matches consist of 3 play modes: Splat Zones, Tower Control, and Rainmaker. Splat Zones has the most in common with Turf War, but adds an element of capture point. There'll be a section of the map marked off, and you'll need to ink the majority of that section to control that area and earn points. If the enemy team gains enough ink on the field, they can stop the capture and gain control themselves. First to the point cap, or most points at the end of the match, wins. Tower Control is about the simplest to understand. When Inklings are stationed on the tower, it'll move into enemy territory. Since the tower's so small, it makes any Inklings on the tower an easy target, and it'll be in constant flux. If the tower reaches the end of the line, the match ends. If not, whichever team got the tower furthest toward the enemy base will take victory when the timer stops. The third and last added the original game as Rainmaker, and it's pretty much single flag capture the flag mode. The Rainmaker spawns in the center and has a shield that must be taken down with ink before grabbing it. Once taken, move the Rainmaker towards the enemy base's volcano-looking construct and instantly win. If no one does so in time, whoever closest reaches the enemy volcano will win. I loved this mode when it first came out because almost no one knew what was capture the flag. Most players would grab the Rainmaker and flee to a corner of the map trying to snipe people with it, making the mode slim pickings for me anytime I managed to get a hold of it. In this game, they still tend not to realize it's a capture the flag mode, but at least they figured out not to just let people hold on to the Rainmaker. If you're not the PvP type but still want to play the game with others, Splatoon 2 adds a brand new PvE mode in the form of Salmon Run. In very set times, a shop in the back of the lobby will offer up part-time work to aspiring Inklings. Before you can even play it online, you'll be forced into 2 separate tutorials, one showing the basic gameplay style, and the other introducing you to the main bosses, but not all of them. In order to play, you have to have the mindset of a typical Horde mode. You have 3 waves of attacks from the Salmonids, who will all march towards the egg basket, attacking anything in their path. Kill the Salmonids for power eggs, which add to the overall score, but the more important eggs that you need to find are the golden eggs. Golden eggs are dropped 3 at a time from golden Salmonids, or boss Salmonids. Once a golden egg drops, any Inkling can grab one and run it back to the basket. There's a quota of golden eggs that you must collect at minimum to finish the stage. There are several boss Salmonid types, and unlike regular Salmonids, these target the players and not the basket. Boss salmonids consist of steelhead, stinger, drizzler, flyfish, steel eel, scrapper, maws, and the ones the tutorial doesn't tell you about, griller and mothership. A common thread among each boss salmonid is to wait for their weakness to reveal and fight it. Some are better to deal with than others. Scrapper, for example, can be shot repeatedly to stun it to more easily kill it from the back, though you can hit its back at any time. Other enemies like Steelhead cannot be killed until a bomb that spawns from its head is exploded before he gets a chance to toss it. Drizzler can't be damaged until it flips over, but at the same time will fire a missile that'll cause a rain cloud to drop ink everywhere, but you can shoot that missile down before it does. My problem lies with the invincible until vulnerable enemies like Flyfish, who have a very specific way to take them out, tossing a bomb into their missile launchers. But unlike Drizzler, there's no defense against those missiles, and once they open to have a bomb tossed in, the missiles are already out, and you need to take out both launchers in order to kill it. I've lost plenty of runs to some terrible Flyfish spawns, and if any enemy in this damn mode needs a nerf or a mechanic rework, it's this Hellspawn pile of frustration. Yeah, you can use your specials like Splashdown and Stingray to deal with them, but the very limited amount of specials you get may have you use them early on in desperation, which by that time may already be too late, or you'll end up wasting them early on, leaving you with none for a time that they really would have been needed. If you get taken down in Salmon Run, all you need to do is have an ally spray ink on you to revive you. You can also move around and even carry eggs while waiting to respawn, so don't be afraid to grab one and head to the basket while you wait for a revive. After each run, you gain points towards a bonus that you can collect from the window outside. It's a great mode to cash grind and get some good gear from, even if you're more interested in PvP, but it follows some strange lockout timers that people don't enjoy all that much. However, if you're more into personal experience than any kind of rewards, any of these games can be played locally or offline with the Shoal Arcade mode, allowing you to get more used to them and their maps when they do go live. There's a bit more I can talk about that covers the upgrade systems and the like, but I'm saving that for a later section. Until then, let's go over the people you'll be playing with and against. Splatoon is first and foremost a family game, and with that you can expect players of all ages and skill levels. If my aforementioned story about Rainmaker mode in the original game wasn't an indication, you'll figure that out pretty fast if you have any sort of skill with shooters. One major issue, shooter or not, is that the game has some really sketchy netcoding and servers. It's not uncommon to be booted from matches for what seems to be no reason. And the game uses a peer-to-peer system with a tick rate of 16, which is laughably bad when the standard shooter tick rate is at least 30. Even Minecraft checks in faster. Sometimes you'll find yourself unloading half a tank into someone who seems to be taking no damage, only to be splatted by someone who wasn't anywhere near you. It brings matches to a seething pit of frustration when I end up in situations where my attacks just don't seem to be doing anything, despite the exact same thing working easily and effectively in other matches. I never really feel fully in control of my actions, and that's easily one of my biggest rage triggers in a video game. A major complaint from many is that this game features no in-game voice chat, but neither did the last one. As I mentioned, I'd be one hell of a vocabulary lesson to the kids playing this game, as I get saltier than a tin of anchovies playing online. Henceforth, I fully understand why a family-focused game might not want to include voice chat in any traditional sense. The point is still the most brought about towards Nintendo being out of touch with online gaming, and often prefaced by that hacky "this is the current year" trope used by lazy writers with nothing interesting to say. Instead, cross-team communication is done in one of two ways. You can press up or down on the D-pad to have your Inkling yell, "this way," or "booyah," the latter often used as a taunt if they don't just do that obnoxious squid-bagging crap. If you're taken down, you can trade "this way" for "ouch," and let people know that you've been taken down and where you were when it happened, so teammates can be on the lookout for enemies. This is decent in letting teammates know where you are overall, especially in Salmon Run, but it's not going to help you form any complex strategies, so if you aren't using Discord, there's another option to voice chat through Nintendo. And it's pretty much garbage. You can use the Switch mobile app on a smartphone to set up a chat room and invite friends who also have the app and a smartphone. Keep in mind that you also need to keep that app open to use it, or you'll be cut from the call. Now note that Discord is also a mobile app that works 50 times better, and you'll realize there's little point in doing things this way. There are better uses for that mobile app, but I'll bring that up later. Toxicity is present in this game, even if it's just more of a silent toxicity. Despite the things the game has done to keep it to a minimum, like not recording player deaths on the scoreboard, there's one major psychological issue that this game does that I have a problem with. When you complete a match, the game shows the two sides on a victory versus defeat scoreboard, and labels the team that you're on as good guys, and the other team as bad guys. I get this is a kid's game, but am I the only one who sees a problem with this binary thought process? Do they do this in Little League sports now, where the other team isn't an opponent or a challenger, but bad guys? I'm probably overthinking this, but something about labeling another team of human players as bad guys makes me think we're not getting past competitive toxicity anytime soon. An overarching community issue is the game's map rotation system. In this game, public maps are on a 2-hour rotation timer, down from the original game's 4. You have a choice of 2 maps for regular, ranked, or league battles. So if a map you're not fond of, in my case Inkblot Art Academy, is in that rotation, you'll have to wait for it to switch out before you see another new set. Pearl and Marina will introduce you to stages each time you log in, but if you're online when a rotation switch hits, you won't have to see that scene again. But you will be booted out of the lobby to start the queue over. Making a scene is all the rage in the community center, though. Each character within the community square is nothing more than NPC representations of other players, each with their own player messages drawn in big white blocks. These are often used for memes, fancy artwork, self-promotion, trolling spoilers. Seriously, I had Force Awakens spoiled for me during a Splatfest once. And as of late, someone might say something that causes the entire community to go into an uproar, and every other message will have something to do with that. Near launch it was furries, after the Splatfest it was Ketchup being super salty about losing, and lately it's a #BringBackCali campaign. Half the time I don't look up what caused it because it's likely to change every week or so. If you like anyone's message in particular, you can give them a fresh, or if they're doing something offensive you can report them. But with no Miiverse to post them to, I don't really get the point of this anymore. Other players you've played alongside are likely to show up as NPCs in your lobby too. Oh yeah, considering I've mentioned Splatfest enough without saying what it was, it's Splatoon's most famous community draw. During Splatfest, which only lasts a bit over 24 hours on a Saturday, once a month, the lobby turns into a night and neon-colored flashy party, complete with a concert from Pearl and Marina, and exclusive tracks and stages to battle within. Players choose to fight on one side or another in an inconsequential battle between really childish things. The final test before the launch gave us cake versus ice cream. The latest Splatfest gave us the legendary matchup between mayonnaise and ketchup, and the upcoming one is the age-old question, would you rather have flight or invisibility as a superpower? Once you've chosen your answer to the question found on the back of a diner's placemat, you'll get a special shirt to wear during the event, and be represented by either Pearl or Marina. The waifu wars have been pretty one-sided, with the choices being between these two this time. Yeah, I picked ice cream, ketchup, and invisibility. I know what I'm about, son. Victory in Splatfest is counted between vote popularity, solo queue victories, and team queue victories. Whoever wins majority wins the fest, and people are in pretty salty debate as to whether or not this is fair, especially since overwhelmingly popular choice teams always end up fighting each other. I do have to say I'm pretty shocked over Nintendo's choice of colors for Mayo v Ketchup, after being so adamant about not including colors that could be construed as bodily fluids. Something about spraying viscous red and white liquid everywhere certainly had people talking. At the end of the event, seashells are passed out to those who participated, and these are used in the upgrade system. Since that's a whole new set of things to cover, we'll move on. Yeah, the quotes is because this category name isn't entirely accurate. Since the game is a $60 title, and knowing first-party Nintendo games will remain so until the heat death of the universe, this thankfully doesn't fall into the trap of offering a paid DLC on top of that. Hell, the old game used a similar system to what many considered its initial detriment, as it released in a fairly bare-bones state. Throughout the game's release, they add more weapons and stages, and thankfully, all for free. Very few stages that have been added were recycled from the original, but a decent amount of the weapons were. Still, the longer you take to get into the game, the more may be available to you. That's not to say all features of the game are free. As plenty have figured out, Amiibos are basically physical DLC, and thankfully they have a far less restrictive use in this game than they did in the last. With the change to single player allowing multiple weapons to be used, Amiibo now only unlocks special outfits, and some songs for the sound test mode. There's also a new feature that lets you take pictures alongside that Amiibo, which is a needless, but at least charming addition to their use. As you level up, you have access to more weapons and outfits, each costing more money depending on its look and, in the case of gear, the amount of slots it has. No weapon is outright more powerful than another, and once you've gained access to the basic few, the only changes will be to sub-weapons and specials attached to them. You can even use the Switch app to buy limited-time gear on Splatnet while you're not actively playing, to be delivered to you in-game, which is a cool but not entirely necessary feature. Upgrades were pretty RNG-based in the original game, and, well, still are, but there's a lot more control as to what you get with various systems in place. As you level up gear, you gain different abilities in the slots, like recovering ink faster, using less ink when using sub-weapons, or being more resistant to the movement speed reduction of enemy ink. If that gear that you just like the look of has limited ability slots, you can use those seashells earned from Splatfest to add up to a total of 4. This time, you can also scrub the ability slots and start the grind anew if you don't like what you got, as well as gaining ability chunks, which, when collecting 10, you can choose to assign that special ability to whatever slot you like. The meta right now has a lot of people just stacking their favorite abilities, like Ink Saver, but this system, grindy as it can be, is a lot more free than the original system of just re-rolling all the slots randomly and hoping for the best. You can even increase the likelihood of gaining a desired ability by using the food truck and gaining the tickets you earn from other modes. Does this seem less like a sequel and more like a title born out of necessity? Like, I remember how weird it felt for them to announce that they were ending the original game's Splatfests, but the announcement of this game just made all the more sense to that choice. Splatoon had a following, but it was on a failing system that was well on its way out. This might not add anything that was sorely needed, nor does it shake up the game's formula to warrant a sequel tag, but I still enjoy it, and plenty of these changes carry it a little further than just Splatoon Deluxe. Here's my final rating. If you didn't own a Wii U, like almost everyone, and you're on board with the Switch, this'll be a good time as any to get into Splatoon. It's not going to be so far out of left field that you won't be able to tell what's going on, even if there's plenty of reference to the original, especially in single player, but the core gameplay experience and the game's largest draw remains largely unchanged. So feel free to see what all the fuss is about. The game certainly breaks norms when it comes to shooters, being focused far less on killing other players and rewarding teamwork and strategy, and offering up a mode that's not like any other seen before. The style alone is worth a look in the gray-brown saturated market, and using liquid physics offers up more interesting shooter dynamics than you would think. Splatoon on the go is only a dream for Wii U owners, and the game works shockingly well in portable mode. If you're willing to deal with a lower battery life, it can make one hell of a time killer as long as you have some good Wi-Fi access. In fact, being able to easily play in your preferred control style with or without motion controls can give anyone the ease of control that wasn't present in the original. No more bulky gamepad. You can run this game in portable, docked, Pro Controller, or even using the separated Joy-Cons in a Wiimote nunchuck kind of style. These all offer up their advantages depending on what feels best for you. Give them a shot and settle into your favorite. There are 2 barriers of entry involved with this game. The initial cost of the game, and of course, the console it's attached to. If you want to play Splatoon 2, you'll need the game and a Switch, and one of those is easier to find and justify the purchase of. It's why I didn't bother numbering this episode, even though I was planning to do away with that whole 3 equals numbered system I used to do for this show. This is seriously too much of an exception to make for that. Amiibos can be used to enhance the experience a bit, but at least you're not straight up locked out of content for not having them this time. If you can find some, there's some fun to be had here at least, just not mandatory fun. Splatoon may be classified as a shooter, but it's a far more simple shooter than others. There's no need for precise aiming or headshots. You don't even need to be all that accurate with your shots. Shooter tactics that work on something like Overwatch or CSGO aren't really going to translate here. If you find your shooter skills putting you ahead of the competition, you might be too far ahead of the competition. And if your main goal is taking down your opponents, you might not find much in the way of challenge here. It could end up as a niche esport title, but you'll more likely be seeing it still broadcast on Disney XD as opposed to ESPN. Those clamoring for a public voice chat really need to look elsewhere. I've made my case for why a public voice chat would be a really bad idea, but even if I don't agree it's a requirement, I will say what was provided is not a good solution. It's way too convoluted for anything beyond novelty, so fire up Discord and chat that way. You'll be a lot better off. In fact, even staying connected seems to be an issue. I've seen Inklings teleporting around, getting shot by things that didn't appear anywhere near them, and worst of all, just getting randomly booted from matches. These servers seem a lot more stable than they were in the original game, but terrible connections are still terrible connections, regardless of how much worse it might be somewhere else. I don't have much faith that this will ever be fully ironed out, even after Nintendo starts charging for their online services, but be prepared for some uncontrollable frustrations. The biggest and most common criticism of this game is very much justified. This didn't change Splatoon much to at all, making this feel far less like a sequel and more like Splatoon 1.5. Hell, without the changes to the lobby or the single-player story, I'd bet most people wouldn't even notice it was a sequel. Everything about this game, from the art to the story, looks and feels like it could have been all reworked into the original game with gradual updates. But the necessity of the matter was that they had to make it for a new console and went the sequel route over the deluxe route. If you want to play Splatoon on the new system, you have to play this. If you still have a good time playing the original, and have no intention to get a Switch anytime soon, you didn't like the first, or you just didn't see enough changes from the first one, you're really not missing out on all that much. Next time, we delve into one of the flashiest titles I've played in a while. Ready your elongated torsos accordingly.